more people who worked on this, between the website, the board, the presentation. There were more people who worked on this, but we're just the few representing Science Club tonight, so.
Can't thank you enough. And could the teachers please stand for their efforts?
This is all of our stuff.
I love seeing so many women interested in science.
Oh, this is all swivelly.
Oh, smile.
Oh, should it be over here? I'm just sitting here holding the phone. Oh, where is our plaque? There we go.
Miss Gauci. Yes. Thank you for inspiring our students. And Zach, thank you for initiating them. And I would just like to announce to the board our new Board of Education student representatives. President is Nick Lamont. Vice President Alexa Lawrence. Secretary Sarah Todd. And Treasurer Joanne Dumanche. And they will be sitting at our table next year.
Okay, policy 6095, graduation requirements. It's here for a second reading.
Yeah, just to remind you that the only addition, looking at the policy number 6095, the only addition is the online credit piece, the final bullet, which reads, the credit limit stated above may be modified for an individual student with the consent of the principal and the approval of the superintendent. We were finding that in some situations with some students, the language above that was limiting what we were able to do for some students that needed additional credit. That's the only change in that particular policy. It's a second read tonight. It is also on the list for action later in the agenda.
Discussion on it?
One clarification. Question. Not first.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against this policy, and I just want to give my reasons so we can proceed quicker during the vote. I've been getting a number of emails and just things left in my mail by various staff members who seem to have a real problem with this, with the online learning. And one of the things that consistently keeps coming up, and what people are telling me, is that because of this back door to graduation, we have a very large number of students who are simply not doing their work during the year and then flooding the administrator's office with requests to either take summer courses or online credit courses in order to graduate. And that there's been, what I'm being told, that there's been a lot of leeway granted in that area simply because there's a push to improve the graduation rates at the high school. And that this to me seems like a trend that I don't support. And before proceeding with this, I would personally like to see a lot more evidence of what's really happening with these, how these things are really being implemented, what it really means for the overall performance of our students, number one. Number two, I still have a problem with this. And the more I think about it, and I know there's not the time because I know it's been hashed out by the board, vetted, and approved. The 65 average for graduation. The more I hear about, the more I keep hearing dissatisfaction from actual staff members, from teachers, real teachers, who I trust, who I know, and who I have confidence in are the real deal, that they actually care about students and what we are turning out in this high school. The more I think this board, and I have voted to approve this, so I'm not, I'm not granting myself any leniency here or exception, but I do believe when they tell me that the progression here is truly toward a dumbing down of our students and a watering down of accountability for students. And I think there's a number of things I want to go through because I think the board is pretty well ready to approve this, but I'm not going to cross that line tonight if it comes up to a vote, because I do believe that, and I think this needs to, in every way, shape, or form that we can look at this, it needs to be looked at again with the idea toward putting more rigor back into our schools, not less. Putting more demands on our students, not less. Holding everyone to strict standards and not making more and more and more different standards for different situations. I don't think it serves these kids well. I don't think it'll serve them well in the future life, wherever they may go. So those are my reasons, and I'll leave it at that, okay?
Any other discussion?
I would just like to say to that if teachers feel this way, anonymous notes and emails don't cut it. They should come forward with some proof to us. We've reviewed the kids that are taking these courses. If they know something other that they believe is going on, and they are professionals and are worried about the students, they should be coming to the board to address those concerns. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and I tend to use the school improvement committee to do that because there is a fear. There is a fear of backlash, and I respect that. And so I think it's incumbent on the board to provide a safe harbor and a safe environment for teachers to come forward to know that the board has their back. And if it's not appropriate for the full board to do it, then I'll do it for the school improvement committee. And I will definitely, yes.
And also through policy, any teacher who wants to.
Well, then you and I, if you want to do it, I mean, we should have a discussion, and we should have a way of communicating to teachers and staff, anybody. I mean, janitor, that they can come forward in a protected environment, and I think we should find a way, a boilerplate statement that will protect them, okay? Because this goes toward any kind of whistleblowing, and I think we need to encourage that, not discourage it. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's realistic. You want to know the truth, Fiona? I don't think it's realistic to ask one or two teachers or staff members to come forward with this kind of very damning information. There's been a long history, and I know this. Again, going into my 11th year, I know this. Long history of various administrators who have come down very hard on people who have come forward with contrary information.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. No,
Right,
it doesn't. It
but
requires
if
a strong board and strong board leadership to have their back and to express it as such.
Also, but on the teacher side, it can just be, this is what I feel, or as teachers feel, that should be part of a policy, and let's discuss it. Not that I'm a teacher and I'm blowing a whistle on anyone, but this is what I would like to see. Therefore, they're not tattling per se, but they're helping a policy grow and be functional.
I agree. I agree. But I think it's incumbent on us to provide, as board members and board committee chairs, to provide that security for them. All right.
John, you had your hand
I share Mr. Cavannero's concerns about both the rigor of the curriculum and the impact this might have on it, and the impact that it might have on, quote, whistleblowing to one's career, or at least one's comfort and ability to do one's job.
Thank you.
Vincent, you also had your hand up?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, sorry. Any other comments? Dan?
I sit under Mr. Cavaniero on the School Improvement Committee, and under Mr. Cavaniero, he's been very gracious to give us an opportunity to have some students who wish to take both the regular THS exam as well as the rigor exam out of the course, so that way they are, come next year, will actually be able to see how rigorous the online learning test is, and to see whether the students who pass the online learning test do better than the regular THS exam tests. And just to see exactly what the rigor of the course is, which is exactly what the committee is for. So hopefully we'll have some answers within the next year.
And at that point, then I would probably gladly approve what we're doing.
Well, again, like, as we did in our committee, just, I think you've got a good direction going.
Okay. Policy 2025, online learning policy, second reading.
Yeah, this is a second read of the online learning policy. Again, the only change is on the second page. We found that listing credits toward graduation in both policies was cumbersome. And all we did was remove the language, which was worded differently even, and replaced it with one place to look for the graduation policy as it pertains to graduation requirements under online learning. We just found that having it in both places creates confusion. Have the language in one spot. And the subcommittee recommended bringing this change to the full board.
Any discussion on the second? John?
I have a question, and it's a test of my memory from discussing this in school improvement. I'm looking at the number of courses by subject area and seeing 36 students are listed under PE and health. I'm looking at the materials from that presentation that we had. And I'm assuming that we are giving no credits for phys ed as a result of an online course. Is that correct?
No, we're giving credits.
State says we can't.
State says we can't, but how can a student
State says we
earn?
can't.
But we can provide a record of physical activity, and we hold a status. They're probably more physically active than they are in their PE class with what they have to do. Most students walk. They keep a regime of what they're eating, a whole wellness component. Now, if a student is expelled from school, they have to have the quarter of PE and health every year, and how are they going to get it if they can't enter our high school? So that's why we offer credit. Health, there's specific writing they have to do. We follow what's expected of them in the class here at the high school.
So we are consciously violating state law.
Probably then, yes, if you want to look at it that way.
Well, I'm looking
But
at
then
it.
if they're seniors and they're to graduate, do we keep them for a whole extra year?
What are the consequences of violating state law in matters like this?
I don't know, I'll have to call and find out.
Well, I'm thinking accreditation is always a problem, isn't it? I mean, if we willy-nilly give out credit just because a kid walks around the block and then signs something to the effect that he's done that, state might not like that. And we do seem to be very concerned about following state requirements in other circumstances. I'm just not sure why not this one.
And we've also talked about asking a PE teacher to come down and lead these students in PE classes twice a week.
That isn't what you said happened.
No, we see that because we've had with the students who are involved in ROTC, we have the officers come down and put the students through the drill, and we have a tutor who works with them so that they stay on top of the written work. So for next year, we will have a PE teacher come down and work with students so they can get their PE and health credit.
Because state law does say it has to be under the guidance of or direction of a certified PE teacher. Okay. So we have already given credits knowingly violating the law to students who have not met the requirements of the state.
A PE probably, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Policy 5071 as amended, wellness policy, first read.
The wellness policy you've seen before. It's gone back to committee for an awful lot of discussion, questions, clarifications. It's, as amended tonight, it's back to first read to give the board an opportunity to spend some time taking a look at it. As you recall, it's To change policy, we typically go through a first read process, second read process, and a vote. It was felt that we wanted to bring this back because of the changes and all the discussion, give the board plenty of time to look at it and have discussion at the board level.
When I originally agreed to the wellness portion the other month, one of my greatest concerns with this was what was going to happen at parties for parents to bring in fundraisers. Again, I don't think, although we may agree to go forward with a healthy environment for our students, I think they should still have the choices. And on page 3 of this policy, it states that part of this will be food and beverages sold as part of school-sponsored fundraising activities, which I'm not okay with. That should be up to the fundraiser to decide what they're selling based off what gives them the highest return value. That is the point of fundraising, is to raise money. And as far as refreshments served at parties, celebrations, and meetings, again, I might encourage somebody, but I will not put it in as part of a policy. If they're celebrating and somebody wants to bring in cupcakes for a class, they have every right to bring in cupcakes. It is not my place to tell them, no, cupcakes are unhealthy, you may not have one.
What page were you on?
Page 3. It starts on page 2, under TPS shall create procedures that address all the food available to students throughout the school day in the following areas. And then it lists 1, 2, in this case, section 3 under that, as well as section 4.
In the paragraph right before that, Dan,
Yes, I see.
starts out with
Families
families are encouraged but not required to support the TPS nutrition education efforts by considering healthy snacks in appropriate sizes donated for occasional class party.
Correct. My concern is the fact that immediately under it, it states TPS shall create procedures that address all foods available to students throughout the school day in the following areas. And it goes through A, B, C, and then it starts off on page 3 with what in particular is going to be covered. Food and beverages, including the a la carte sales in food service program on school campuses. That's fine, we're selling the food. Food and beverage sold in vending machines, snack bars, school store, and concession stands. That's fine, it's our concession stands, we're providing the food to the students. Food and beverages sold as part of a school-sponsored fundraising event. Absolutely not. It is the fundraiser's choice to figure out what makes them the most money. It is not up to the board to tell them, well, we don't agree, this isn't healthy. You shouldn't consider this. You should do a better choice. No, it's a fundraiser. It's about making money at fundraising. That's not our place to say. Under section 4, served at parties, celebrations, and meetings. Well, all right, instead of having bagels and cream cheese, we'll hand out yogurt bars type thing. That's for us to decide, but by covering parties, celebrations, and meetings, now you're encompassing all sorts of events throughout Torrington Public Schools. I don't agree with that. It shouldn't be all-encompassing.
Yes.
These are subsections of C, which are just saying guidelines, but this isn't saying what that has to do, what you have to do for them.
That's fine. I will not agree with this until those 2 sections are removed. Again, there should be no guidelines. It's a party, a celebration. It's up to you to decide what you have. It's not us. It's not our choice to sit there and say, we don't agree, we think you should bring.
Well,
If you're fundraising, I think it's up to you to find the best person to provide you the greatest return for what you're looking to gain.
I have 2 points to that. First point being that I'm sure you would have a problem if we were giving Red Bull and
If I thought a parent was bringing Red Bull in to give to students, then we'd have a problem with the parent. But I don't think a parent is going to bring in Red Bull to students.
but this is just saying creating guidelines so that doesn't happen. It's not saying that you can't do this.
But you're specifying Red Bull. Now, Monster drinks, which we're all familiar with, is going through a major legal battle about whether they're even going to be allowed to sell to anybody under the age of 18 because of the amount of caffeine that they have.
Well, we're not there yet. The point is that it's going to create, my other point being is that healthy food certification would dictate this anyway. So we as a board have to either vote to just blanket all these exceptions or pick them out anyway, which I think what section C of this does, guidelines for foods and beverages based on nutrition goals in the following categories. So it's not limiting or telling anybody what to do, it's just saying that we're going to create guidelines.
And put a blanket exception in for those events.
If we want to, yeah. That's up to the board.
This doesn't set any guidelines. All this policy states is that we shall create a procedure and guidelines for foods and beverages in the following categories. This isn't the actual procedure. This is just saying that we're gonna do that. In that procedure, we could list, say, whatever. All this simply states is that we're gonna create a procedure and guidelines for it. Chris, you had your hand up.
I was just reading it, Dan, and there's procedures to set the guidelines. The guidelines could say, we're going to sell pies, but in order to sell pies, the parents have to come and pick them up. And that's all that it's saying. I don't think it's as restrictive as you're reading it.
My challenge is the fact that boards change. If you go back 8 years, the only person on this board who was here is Mr. Cavaniero. And back then, there were a lot of other viewpoints. So, again, although we may have the best of intentions, I look forward to the future to boards that may not be as open-minded or as forward-thinking. So, play devil's advocate. What's the worst that could happen to somebody who comes in, reads this, and then makes changes?
I also am very concerned that we're looking at approving a policy where the procedures haven't been created. And I will not by any means support this without seeing the procedures that we're looking at for these huge changes in the public schools. I think it's the cart pulling the horse.
A question and then some comments. These procedures will come before the board or not?
It'll be a wellness council, which is actually mandated by the state that we have, and we actually already have that in our policy right now. We actually already have a wellness policy.
But to imply to Dan that we will get another shot at this, then, that's not what this policy calls for.
I'm sorry, another shot?
Another shot at this. Dan says, well, we'll set the policies, but the policies won't come before the board.
Correct.
Okay.
You mean the procedures?
Procedures.
/ guidelines.
Okay, yeah, / guidelines / you gotta do it. I'm worried about anything that has so much outside influence. We have all the way from Washington to Litchfield, people telling us what we should do. You know, the First Lady wants us to get behind her. And granted, there's a lot of room to get behind the First Lady in several ways, one of which is because the policy is kind of comprehensive, or at least what she wants is kind of comprehensive. But to be told that we need to engage the kids where they are, I think is a half-truth at best. That's not half-truth, it's true. And this is where the kids are. But they are given to us so that we can dictate what they eat, how many calories they consume, or what percentage of those calories are saturated fats versus whatever else nutritionists are working on at the moment. This is not part of our core mission, is worrying about what kids eat and how much they weigh or anything else. Reading, writing, arithmetic, social studies, mathematics, science, the thing we saw tonight. I mean, all of that is why we're here. And sometimes those of us who like least being told what to do then turn around and are quite willing to tell other people what to do in areas that we don't have to. My last concern here has to do with this as a possible weapon to be used against teachers for not following to the letter, or at least to some administrative idea of the letter, what this policy says to the mind of the administrator. Paul was speaking earlier about this exact problem. You know, what happens if somebody doesn't get in line with something? What then is available to the administrator to make their life miserable? This would just be something else to help make their life miserable in ways that, once again, have nothing to do with whether or not a kid can communicate, calculate, or knows anything about history or science or anything else. Now, I would love to be able to compare this to other policies, because it was suggested that I do that at the last policy committee meeting. I have yet to be given a policy book, even though I've been promised one several times over the last few months. You know, And yeah, can you go online and get it? Sure, they're updated as of, I think, February is what it says. Well, maybe, maybe not, but it's hard to see. It's also really annoying to have to click on every one of those and then read it all the way through. But other policies that deal with our core mission, that's fine. This one doesn't deal with our core mission. It deals with telling kids what to do so that they fit someone else's idea of a health and wellness standard. That's all.
Mr. Jocelyn, do you have a policy manual?
I have one online. Do I have? Yes, I do.
Could you put forth an effort and copy that for Mr. Kisco?
I would be happy.
Fourth time I was in Thomas.
I offered him my own, but I was told that my successor will need it. So,
We'll make it easy. You give it to me, I'll give it to him, so I know he gets it.
all right,
And then I
that
don't have
works.
to hear it.
All right, that
Thank
works.
you.
Mr. Morrow.
I just wanted to speak to Mr. Kisco's comments. Part of the core mission of the superintendent and the district is to service the entire student, the whole student. That is part of our mission in the school district. And I think wellness and being healthy is a part of that. To speak to your concerns about just this wellness committee just sort of having carte blanche to do what they want to do, part of one of the most important parts of this policy, I felt, was the evaluation component, and then it states that the wellness coordinators, which are going to be the site administrators at each of the schools, so they're going to be wellness coordinators, which will probably be either the principals at each of the schools or their designee. They're the ones who are going to be on-the-ground wellness coordinators. They're reporting back to the Wellness Council. As also a part of the evaluation, wellness program coordinators shall report annually to the Wellness Committee, and the District Wellness Committee reports annually to the BOE Policy Committee. So, there are checks and balances here. We're not just going to give a group of people, full power over the health and well-being of the students. There is accountability, and it will be reporting back to the Board of Education on a regular basis.
Reports back doesn't mean that the board will have any say about what they've done.
No, we're the Board of Education. If we don't like the way things are going, we can write another policy. It's not you. Mr. Judge. You're welcome.
Excuse me. My question is why this is even part of our policy manual as opposed to, it seems to me that it should be something more of, we as a board, we have a discussion item and we talk with the superintendent about how we feel about what the district may or may not want to do in this area. And I like the words when it says encourage or strive. I don't like when the words are used shall be required to do any of these things. It's, I don't understand why we just, if the board at a point feels that maybe the administration through staff and building administrators can do something more on an encouraging basis. That's one thing, but I would like someone to explain why this has to actually be a policy, where we're mandating these things. It's just...
I can answer that really quick.
Okay.
It's because we've been mandated.
What's that?
It's because we've been mandated.
By who?
2006 federal law requires that school districts have a wellness policy. We already have wellness policy. We already have one. And a year ago, in response to the Chile assessment and the state assessment of our wellness policy that the Fit Together initiative did, I was charged by this Board of Education to create an ad hoc committee and to work on our wellness policy. That is what this is. 99% of the area, I'm going to probably even say probably all the areas in here that say shall is required that we have that in there. So.
And my response is that the fact that it wants the local board or requires the local board to actually take a vote, to me, that tells me as an elected official and a member of the board that this is my opportunity to tell the federal government that I don't want them dictating at the local level, things of this nature. So if that's the way it is, I mean, I think everything that's being, what they're trying to accomplish, what hopefully everyone wants to accomplish is wellness of the kids. I just disagree that it should be mandated in our policy manual. So in that regards, I'm going to vote against it just as a voice of protest to our federal government. Thank you.
How many policies do we have?
We have, yeah, I mean, that's the problem. We have so many policies
are
and
mandated.
they're hard.
Almost all of them, right? I mean.
Yeah, and they're hard to enforce. Some of the policies that are truly needing to be enforced. And we'll go into what the juvenile court system does later on.
Hold on. Ella? That's policy chair.
This policy isn't intended or meant to, or I don't read it as telling someone what to do. It's a learning tool. It's for the teachers to teach the children to live well. I mean, you know, eat well. Here's a choice. If you want a cupcake versus a carrot, you can have a cupcake. But this is the reason why a carrot would be more nutritional. It's a teaching opportunity. That's how I see it. And that's how I see this policy.
But it does specifically restrict. It's not just educational. There are punitive ends of the policy, so it's not.
Mandated.
I understand.
Correct.
But
Correct.
the feeling that's vibing from this side of the table and that end of the table is that you're telling a parent what to feed your kid, and they feel that, it's not really.
But you're not. You're educating the parent
But you
and the
could
child.
punish someone for not doing it.
No, you can't.
No, you can't. There's no punishment.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no, there's just choice.
But
But
when
there's
they,
not choice, because the choices wouldn't be there.
Yes, they would be there.
You're not
No,
gonna have a
you're not
cupcake
serving
and a carrot. You're not serving them, you're saying, eat a carrot. It's not just the food
Absolutely
portion.
not.
there'll be a cupcake on the
Absolutely
lunch
not.
line?
There'll be a cup, right.
Absolutely not.
There'll be a cupcake on the lunch line?
Not saying on the
That has
lunch
nothing to do with this
line,
policy,
but-
that's the USDA,
Right.
this lunch program has nothing to do with this policy, this policy is
But
the
you
USDA.
have, and I think there's a committee that's going to determine the procedures and guidelines that are not stated in a policy that we're going to approve. But we don't know the guidelines and the procedures, and we have no say over those guidelines and procedures because that committee is going to set them up. And that committee is going to implement them, and then once a year, they're going to report back to the policy committee how it's going.
Well, I mean.
Is that what I'm getting at?
To answer that, we have a policy already in place that already says that, by mandate. We already have a policy that does that. This spells out even more what that one-page policy has. We already by law have to do that, and we're not doing it. So this policy goes ahead and explains exactly what's gonna happen. It doesn't add anything else to it. And
I was just trying to understand the
Right.
procedure. That is the procedure, though.
absolutely.
I just have two other comments. In addition to the food portion, when we implemented the original wellness policy, this year in the elementary school, now the kids have PE. They have to jog through their recess because part of the wellness. And during math, reading, they're doing jumping jacks. When my kids in math or reading, I want them doing math or reading. I don't want them exercising. And I don't want them that's like saying to you at your only break at work during the day for the 20 minutes that these kids are at recess, you're gonna run laps around the parking lot because you can't play on the playground because we're a healthy school community. I think it's gone way too far. I think this leaves it too much in the discretion of other people other than the board. And if we're making a policy, the procedures need to be in place attached to the policy before we can approve something like this. Oh, and also, Torrington Public Schools brought in $215,000 last year through bake sales. It's a huge amount of money to lose for things that are, we don't know if that's gonna end up in the procedures, if it's not gonna end up in the procedures, we don't know that.
It has nothing to do with it.
Well,
It does unless they get an exemption.
Right.
Right, but that's healthy food certification, which we've already passed to do, and it has nothing, that's already done.
Yeah, but this policy, as Dan just pointed out on page 3, does address school-sponsored fundraising activities, parties, celebrations, and meetings, that there will be a procedure established by this wellness council as to how those will be conducted.
TPS shall create procedures that address all foods available to students throughout the school day in the following areas.
Yes.
Okay.
But
You already
who
do that
creates
anyway.
those procedures?
This would be the wellness council that is consisting of,
Right, but our point is not that we disagree with having procedures, we're not saying that we disagree with guidelines. We're disagreeing with the fact that we're going to approve a policy and someone else is gonna make the teeth in it. We're gonna have no input in that portion of the policy. Someone else is going to say, we're gonna say, yeah, there'll be guidelines and procedures. And then someone walks in and says, there'll be no cupcakes, there'll be no this, there'll be no pie sale, there'll be no, and we're just going to have to sit back because we said that this group is going to create the guidelines and the procedures. That's what I'm getting for the concern. Sorry, Paul.
Well, to me, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you that, to me, that's a technicality, and this could be rewritten. I don't want to lose sight of the forest for the trees. That's a technicality. It's easily to put two sentences that whatever whatever the oversight committee comes up with has to be approved by the board on a yearly basis. Boom. So whatever they're going to do, something like that. I mean, that's just a technical matter. While I understand the sensitivities about too much intrusion by government, I would just like to remind the board, okay, that what we saw here tonight, right, this science project that we all stood up and applauded for, one of the key components of why these kids won that award was because what they did was tied to an environmentally progressive design. Is that not correct? Right? The whole idea of environmentally progressive thought came in from the green movement, which was after my generation going through school, and it was embedded within the school. It was put in the forefront of kids' minds. I know, as a single parent, listening to my kids argue and discuss in much greater depth and detail than I ever did, environmental impact of whatever it is that they were doing, engaged in. Our school system put that in front of them. And the result is that we had a generation of kids who are much more aware of their footprint on the universe, okay, on the planet at least, okay? And to me, this whole thing goes toward a certain kind of rigor that puts in the forefront, puts wellness and nutrition on the radar as part of what we need to educate our children about, because it is very much determinant of their lives, of the future quality of their lives. This generation of kids is going to have to deal with the extraordinary complex issues about genetically modified organisms in their food supplies. The United States of America has a vastly more compromised food supply than most of the rest of the world, which is why precisely, if you read The Economist, you'll find out that more and more European countries are simply refusing to buy our product. They simply won't buy our stuff because of the junk that we put in it and the crap that we use to modify it, you know? And they're astonished. European nations are astonished by what we allow in our food supplies. And, you know, old goats like me, we don't have to worry about it. But for the next generation, it is very, very much of a major concern to them. And putting this on the radar for them to discuss, to think about, and everything that they do, I think is a hugely progressive initiative, and I think it should be supported. I do think it needs to be refined in certain ways, and we need to have some more board, you know, maybe approval of it. But the general drift of this thing, I think, is very sound and very valuable, and I think it needs to be approved. I do.
The old policy would cover education about Franken-Foods as well. I think the old policy pretty much does everything you're talking about, Paul. I don't think we need the new policy to do these things that you
But there
want.
needs to be somebody to put it, this puts somebody in charge of keeping that discussion alive and living. Is that not right, Ben? Is that essentially what the plus of this thing is?
Absolutely. When we had the assessment done by Fit Together, we applauded their efforts and recognizing how poor our policy is and how poor our wellness is in this district. And this board voted unanimously to create a wellness committee to be able to address that. And that's exactly what this policy does. It's made up from a diverse group of professionals, education professionals,
But
healthcare
I
professionals.
think you have to open your mind a little bit and say that there's a few, I think, gray areas, or there's some points that need to be tightened up in it.
Oh, absolutely, I'd be open to that,
Right,
absolutely.
to get,
But I
to
mean,
cover some of the other.
yeah, any of
issues.
those concerns, I think, it'll go back to policy, right? And I think, so I guess, are we documenting those concerns, Mr. Jocelyn? And I mean, if this is gonna, okay.
Yeah, I mean, at this
You just
point,
woke 'em up,
you're looking at the policy which sets forth the procedures for setting guidelines. Your policy does indicate, as has been pointed out, that the guidelines will be presented to the board and reviewed by the board. And I agree with somebody that said at this table that it would just require a line in the policy that would require, rather than just presenting the guidelines to the board, to bring them to the board for approval. That's just one line.
That was the guy sitting next to me.
What's that?
That was the guy sitting next to me.
Yeah. was
It
that Paul?
just shows you how automatically he tunes me out. He just, as soon as I talk, he shuts down.
How many years on the
Right,
board?
right
have you
there.
been?
I don't know. Shuts down.
I would just like to say to the board that student wellness has been around for a very, very long time. If you went through college now,
Yeah, I remember.
you, in the same age bracket, is that we were trained to teach the whole child, your emotional, social, and physical wellness. Because, and as the years have gone by and we learn about brain development and the importance and significance of how the child's body grows and develops and the food they eat, having worked in an urban environment and knowing how many students are identified quite early for diabetes, we need a wellness policy in this district. We need to, as has been created, have a more updated policy, and then work with through our Human Resources Department and our principals in coming up with how this policy shall be implemented following recommendations by the board. Wellness of children, why do they have to have physicals before they come to school? They can't come to school unless they have physicals. Why do we have nurses in every building? Because we have so many children with allergies and other illnesses or required meds on a daily basis. Worrying about the health and wellness of children in school systems has gone on forever and it's getting stronger. So giving guidance on what we shall serve through our lunch programs, making recommendations or offering suggestions to our PTOs, it's still the same thing. And there's, if you're reading The Economist, and I'm reading, information on how children grow and develop. To have healthy children really is the biggest impact on their readiness to learn.
Because this came up at the last meeting, it just came up again, and it really angers me. 99% of the kids in the Torrington Public Schools that have diabetes have type 1 diabetes, which means that their pancreas does not produce islet cells. So when we keep throwing around that food is causing diabetes, it's awful for the kids in the school system that have type 1 diabetes, my daughter being one of them. The reality is the majority of kids that have diabetes have type 1 juvenile diabetes. So I don't want diabetes being used as an excuse for why we want to implement such a policy.
Fiona, I was just saying when we were in an urban environment, what we were seeing with the obesity of children. This was a pediatrician.
But that is not a Torrington problem.
No, but I was just why
It's a
it's
national problem. We have to live in Torrington. We can't see diabetes, but we can see other consequences of poor American diet on youth. Open your eyes.
Obesity, you can't, I mean.
You just open your eyes and
Yeah,
you can see the
think that
problem.
it doesn't exist is
I'm not saying it
responsible.
doesn't exist, I'm saying it's irresponsible for last meeting for this to be argumented about, and again brought up this meeting, to the kids that actually have diabetes, that no matter what they eat, their diabetes isn't gonna go away. So let's make it clear when we're talking about diabetes and the affiliation of food.
You think you want to bring this back to your policy committee and talk about it, or do you want to go
No,
around
I'm
with the way it
afraid
is?
no. No, yes.
Okay.
We'll bring it back to the policy.
Some of the things we talked about tonight have been discussed in policy, and this is what came out of it.
I think the main thing that came, what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to have the procedures and the guidelines listed out in order to be effective.
I've heard less of a mandate element to it as well. That's what I've heard.
What do you mean less of a?
Well, less, as Andrew says, fewer shalls, more permissive rather than restrictive.
And that would be in the guidelines.
Well, the policy itself has a tremendous number of the word shall, and they're using the word shall. Andrew's comments, Dan's, the word shall is a little too strong.
That's what the state uses, that's what the Yale research uses to evaluate wellness policy specifically. I spoke with the State Department of Education, the director of.
Well, these are just recommendations.
No, I understand, I'm just saying, I'm just answering that.
Yep.
There's a reason why our rating was so low, is because we didn't have those in it, so.
Okay. Have fun.
See you again in a couple of months.
Okay. Bullying prevention and intervention policy.
This is a first read. I was asked by the subcommittee, the policy committee, to bring forward in its current form. It's a template from Shipman and Goodwin. As we all know, Public Act 11232 is very prescriptive on what we should have in place in our schools as far as identifying, defining, investigating, reporting bullying and acts of bullying. Shipman and Goodwin has developed this template at the request of many districts. It brings up to date all definitions and reflects the requirements of Public Act 11232. It's spelled out. We run it by our administrators. They like the fact that it's prescriptive. It doesn't leave any room for interpretation of what we have to do under the law. It includes our safe school climate plan, which puts a little more information out in front of people as well than our current plan does. Our current plan meets the law. This one explains it more. It was the wishes of the policy committee to bring it in front of the board for a first read, as is, and get some input and some direction on it and going forward.
We already have a safe school climate plan policy, correct?
We do.
So this
We were
is actually-
required to have one.
But this is two separate policies.
There is some discussion at the state level now that a policy alone would meet the need of a safe school climate plan. Shipman, however, to be sure, because we've talked many times about the ambiguity and that law is not always black and white. Shipman likes to see a policy and a safe school climate plan, but if you read them, they're pretty much the same.
No, the
Same
question was,
definition.
don't we already have a safe
We
school
do.
climate plan policy?
Yeah.
So this is introducing the new bullying policy, but you've also included a revision to the safe schools, so it should have been two separate items?
Could be, but
We already
Shipman,
have a safe school climate
We do.
plan policy.
Right, but this bullying includes a safe school
Okay.
climate so that it would be placed,
So
it
you
would
would
be
be,
all in one rather than having a separate bullying and a separate
Okay.
safe school. A lot of discussion on policy.
Chris,
The section that's designated X, well, Roman numeral 10, the
what page you on?
11 on the safe The second one. So this is the first read. Are we adding to that to specifically tailor this section to our school district? That's my understanding, right? It's left, so are we opting not to do that?
I can speak to that. Under the law, for the first time this year, we were asked to survey staff, parents, and students. We've gotten those results back. It's required under the law to take those surveys, examine them in light of our Safe School Climate Plan, and make judgments as to, do we want to adjust, do we want to tweak it, do we want to emphasize something. This would be the first time we would have that data back from parents, students, staff, to be able to take a look at that plan and say, we want to beef this up a little more, we want to take care of that. My job as the Safe School Climate Coordinator for the district is to work with the various Safe School Climate Committees at each of the schools to administer the survey and begin to look at the Safe School Climate Plan in light of the results that were returned.
Wouldn't it make more sense than to collect the data and have a full policy before we pass it, than to pass this with a, hey, we're gonna have data and change this section later?
Well, I have
Or, well, reading, I'm saying, when it's coming for a first reading, right?
even as a first read, I'll be honest, I'm not happy with the blanks and the lack of a heading and an actual policy number. And I mean, this whole first read, you know, you're going to change most of it. I mean, I think it should have come to us with a policy number, with a title, with the, instead of the blank Board of Education, I think it should say Torrington there, so that we're actually reading what will be the policy instead of, I think what Chris is alluding to is this is kind of a rough outline.
Yeah. The specific motion from the policy committee was to bring this forward as it is. If it's the wishes of the board to send it back to policy to fill in those blanks, put it in the format, that's certainly a direction the board would go.
Is there a timeline?
We have a policy in place. We have a Safe School Climate Plan in place. There is no, and we're required to have a policy, which we do. But it's not as comprehensive as the one that Shipman is
So
suggesting.
we have time to review the data and hold off.
I wouldn't wait too long, because I think it's a document that's going to be helpful at the school level.
What's the, who's in charge of administering this? What I'm concerned about is this was reported, I think it was in the Register a couple months ago, that when they actually looked to find, the state required that schools keep record of this stuff, right? And I think only 2 schools, is that right? Only 2 schools actually produced regular logs?
What we have to have available to the public is,
Yes, the question was only 2 schools?
I believe that's what the Register Citizen report.
Yeah, so 5 of our schools simply weren't, once again.
No. The
No.
Register Citizen reported that only 2 schools had it. That does not mean that they all don't have it.
Okay, so how many?
They were not able to get access to it at some of the schools because the principals were busy or doing other functions, and it just wasn't available at that time. You know, when the person.
All right, I heard it differently, but all right,
But
how many
there's
schools?
also 2 distinctions. You keep, all principals keep a daily record
Yeah.
of discipline, okay? You know, who they talk to, who they call, but then to become bullying, you have to make sure it matches the definition of bullying, and that's, you know, over time, you know, one person to another. It's not just a one-time incident.
I'm concerned about just the practicality of what is it we're trying to do with this thing, right? Everybody here who's been to school has seen bullies, we know bullies, we know what bullying is. Bullying is one of those things you have to address quickly and decisively. I mean, if you're gonna have any, it's gotta be addressed quickly and decisively. And absolutely none of this goes toward swift and fair and practical implementation. It just is 180 degrees from that. You know, this is extremely lawyerly, no offense, Mr. Rivero, and it provides all kinds of protections for the people who try to implement it, but it doesn't provide protection for the kids who are getting bullied. You know what I mean? It doesn't do anything for them. It protects the school, it's not protecting the kids. And I don't know, I mean, we can refine and tweak this thing, but nobody's gonna do it. I mean, nobody's gonna go through all this paperwork. It's much easier for administrators to simply look the other way and pretend, oh, please, Cheryl, don't, I've also got letters about stuff that goes on here that simply doesn't get reported. When it does get reported, policies are not followed, trust me on this. And this thing, they're just not gonna follow it. They're simply not, and therefore the bullying, this will not in any way, shape, or form, practically speaking, address and help the kids who are getting bullied. I don't know where we go from this. I know the state requires it, and I say rubber stamp the state one, and I still get back to, I'd like to see something that's simpler, just really, really much simpler, and that tasks assistant principals and assistant principals with taking this stuff really seriously and acting really quickly and stopping it. You know, we're making it as best an effort as they can to stop it. And not just to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork that shows that they kind of made the effort and the bullying continues, you know? So I know we have to come up with a policy. I know we have to make it in alignment with the state and all that business, but I just know this is not going to get the job done. And therefore, I don't feel good about it because passing another policy that simply is not going to be implemented doesn't really make me feel good, because I still worry and I still think about and I still, you know, think it is our responsibility to put something in place that gets the job done, which is stop kids, bigger kids, from picking on smaller kids.
Excuse me. Two comments. First one is disciplinary interventions on page 9. Anonymous complaints, however, shall not be the basis for disciplinary action. I find that to be objectionable at all levels of government, that government bureaucrats utilize that as a way to avoid going out, page 9, going out and actually seeing for themselves whether or not, just because it's anonymous, that the behavior that's being complained about is or is not taking place. I'd like to see that be stricken. I'm not saying that if you get an anonymous complaint, that gives you the right to shut down the school immediately or act in an irrational manner. But based upon the severity of what the anonymous complainant is saying, that should elevate the building administrator or the school administration to act appropriately and not just disregard what the complainant is saying, because the complainant does not want to identify themselves. So it bothers me at all levels of our government, and you'll see it at all levels of our government, that they want to protect their own interests more than the interest of what the complainant is actually talking about. The second section that I'm concerned about is on page 7, notice to law enforcement. I'll just go into my little conversation with, I finally talked to the juvenile court probation officer, and one of the concepts that I talked to the enforcement employee was, I as a board member would like to see strict enforcement of laws and policies that the school district has. And he was very polite, and he said, but that's never been the behavior, that's never been the conduct of the juvenile court system. And why I bring that up now is when we establish such an important policy as bullying, I don't want words like may consult with the school resource officer, reasonably believes. I want this to be coordinated with the building administration. I want it to be coordinated with the school administration. I want it to be coordinated with the juvenile court system, and I want it to be coordinated with the police department and the school resource officer. And I know that, I know that from talking to teachers over the years, that has never true, whose turf it is, whose jurisdiction it is, has always been somewhat questionable. And I think this is a good example of when we establish a policy like this, we try to really get to know that the juvenile, if this school district says this is an important policy, we want to know that the school resource officer will be obligated, as will the building principal, as will the juvenile court system, to strictly enforce these violations. And it's my opportunity to just say, if your resource officer is not on the same page with the principal and the juvenile court system's not on the same page with the resource officer, bringing the charges into the court system, I don't really like as a board approving something just to have it on the books to kind of say, well, we absolve ourselves of what we're required to do, and at the end of the day, we know in practicality, we as a school board really have no way to monitor whether or not our policy is being strictly enforced or reasonably enforced. And by reasonably enforced, i.e. students know that there is uncertain behavior. There will be no leeway. You will go through the system and you will be punished. So that's, whether or not this accomplishes it, I don't know. With notice to law enforcement, this type of wording, I would like to see stronger wording as far as how everybody has to deal with this important issue.
Well, much like the Wellness Committee brought forward a wellness policy, I would expect the Juvenile Court Committee to bring forward a policy that they've worked with, as they've worked with Fit Together and the doctors in the area. I'm sure you're working with the juvenile court system to come forward with a policy that has teeth and is in agreement with them.
And what I've learned through talking to this probation officer is that I'm definitely going to need the help and assistance of our administration to put a little more teeth to articulating what the administrative aspects are. And then we will need to bring it back before the board to articulate more what our concerns are, what our experiences are, which means to have more revelation by the administration to the board of how these things are handled, if they have concerns that they're not, how they would like to see these issues that go through the resource officer, go through the juvenile court system, if they think that we need to tweak or present to the powers that be to enforce these things, we as a board really have to get on a united front to somehow get all of these different agencies and departments working in the same direction. It's an important issue, and I know it's not happening. And they'll admit, you know.
No, just like the wellness policy took a year.
Right.
Working with that collaborative group.
Right.
So in your ad hoc committee, work with a collaborative group. You can add anybody you want. That's why you're in charge of the ad hoc committee.
I was trying.
And, you can bring something back. In the meantime, do we have a year to wait to implement something legally?
A year would be a long time. I think what we need to do based on our experiences this past year, our policy needs to be more clear and consistent with current law and definitions. The one we have is outdated.
But similar to the wellness policy that we had on the books, we are updating. We could put in a bullying policy, and then based on the review that comes out of the juvenile court ad hoc committee, we could fine tune that policy, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that would be a wise way to do it, so that you have the current definitions in place and the current requirements in place, and then tweak it based on the information you collect. Just real quick, if I may, on the anonymous complaints, it's probably poorly worded. I'll tell Shipman I said that, but what that means is we are not to discipline students based solely on an anonymous complaint. It requires the administration to investigate it and make sure that we're not just taking somebody's word for it and disciplining a student. That's all that means. And in fact, in the reiteration of the law, anonymous complaints must be taken seriously.
And just so you know, we have worked this year with the high school, the middle school, with the police department, with the juvenile courts. They have a full group, it's called LIST, and right now they're working on a protocol.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying
with the
that.
schools.
One of the problems with this policy, and I don't know if there's a solution for it, and we talked about it in policy committee, is that these definitions of bullying and everything that follows from them have to do with positive acts, things that people actually do and that you can see and document. There really isn't a way to deal with those negative kinds of behaviors, the shunning, for instance, the ignoring, which is another way, and as I was told by people who've raised girls, girls are better at it than boys, which is why I may be less familiar with it. But, and I don't know if there is a way to deal with that, but if we're going to talk about this again, if anyone has an idea, write it down and bring it up next time around.
I'm going to go back. This idea's been brought up in other contexts before, and I forget, maybe there was just a reason it can't be done. And this is definitely a big step forward, but to me, it would, I'd love to see this, a student court, okay? And I know it takes effort and work to get one rolling, but this to me would be the perfect kind of situation where students, you know, who have been, you know, beginning, I guess, in secondary school or brought up by the time you're juniors and seniors, you know, you've got your, so students themselves handle a lot of this stuff. And just that process of students actually being responsible for it. These are normative values, that's what we're talking about, normative values here. Establishing normative values, students doing it themselves, much, much, much more impactful than having top-down from, you know, adults saying, blah, 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 and possibly having much longer-term positive consequences, because those are the kinds of subtleties. I've talked about this, about bullying. It's been a couple months ago. My kids are back, you know, both of them now are in school, so when I do see them, and we had come up prior to this, and they were saying very much the thing you were saying, that in your day, bullying was, you know, big guys knocking down little guys, knocking books and pushing physical. It's much more subtle than that now, you know.
And your idea has merit. Common law is a lot better than statutory law in so many places, and this is one of them.
And it would just go to so many things in terms of, once again, getting kids involved and, you know, I mean, even thinking of a legal career, but just letting them learn how to present. I mean, the educational component is huge, but then the practical component of then forcing kids to think about these things.
This almost looks like a school improvement, Tom.
Well,
Because
where do
you're
you go?
improving the schools.
What do we, I mean, we can certainly talk about it, but we would certainly need to get advisors. We'd certainly need to get retired lawyers involved, Mr. Rivera, you might know. I mean, I would think there's plenty of retired lawyers in Torrington who would want to, maybe not the other two. Right, when is raining on the golf course, right? When is raining on the golf course? Okay?
All right.
Or the Mercedes dealers club. You know, but